for joining us for a talk with one of our community curators. My name is David Ballantyne. I am a program manager with the Museum Access and Equity Department here at the Science Museum of Minnesota. And our community curators program was inspired by this fact that we have such a large and extensive collection here at the Science Museum, representing cultures from Hmong to Dakota folks to Ojibwe folks. And yet, most of the time, what we're seeing is these collections that are curated by museum folks who don't belong to those backgrounds, and sort of looking from the outside at cultural representation. And so Jennings Mergenthal in our department, who runs this program, said, what if we were working with community members? What if we were working with artists who were able to come in and explore our collections and interpret them their own way? And what if we were able to put those up in the lobby, free for anyone to see, and actually try and model what actual cultural representation looks like? And so this is our pilot year. We've worked with a few wonderful curators, and today we're going to be talking with Mallory Glynn. They're a wonderful community curator. They're going to talk to you about their life and their background a little bit, and they're going to walk you through a slideshow, and then we'll talk a little bit about their display. Thanks, Mallory.
Mitakiapi, Mallory Makiapi, Ka'a e Mashta Makiapi. Shakpe Hemantahaye Ka'a Ihantoa Oyate. Hello, my relatives. My name is Mallory, and my Dakota name is Mashte, meaning where the sun shines. I am originally from Shakopee, Minnesota, but I am from the Yankton Sioux Nation of South Dakota, and I come from the Glynn, Pigsley, Cook, and Tunkana families. I have a background in anthropology and American Indigenous Studies with a degree from Minnesota State Mankato, and I just started my master's program, a master's in fine arts for cultural administration with the Institute of American Indian Art in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Whoop, whoop, whoop. So what I wanted to cover in my community curators work was about being a Dakota woman, a Dakota Wiya, and what that means for some of the items that are in the collections that are women's items. So, our lovely schedule. So, as I said, I'm a descendant of the Yankton Sioux Nation of South Dakota. I learned to bead as a young adult. I learned fairly late in my life at 21, and I completely taught myself. And with this, I took on a rather large and kind of, what is the word I'm looking for? Ambitious, there we go. Ambitious project with this, because I have only beaded like freestanding pieces, like freestanding earrings. I haven't physically beaded on leather prior to this. So that was a little bit of a challenge. So this is the archival item that I took from, this is from what I remember from working with Pejuta. It's a reservation era piece, meaning it's after the 1870s, but it's prior to the 1910s, I want to say. And specifically, this item was chosen because as we were going through different items to look at beading, Pejuta asked me, what's something you want to see? Just what's something you want to see? So I said, okay, let's type in Yankton. Let's type in my tribe's English name and see what comes back. And 3 items came back. 2 beaded items, and 1 is a men's ceremonial item. So obviously I was not going to go for that item, but the 2 items that did come back, one was this coin purse, and then the second one was, I believe, like a pouch or a bag, but it was fully beaded and almost 1.5 feet long. And I was not that ambitious. I don't know that I was that ambitious. So what I did with this was I took the center pattern from the 2 blue crosses and then the centerpiece, and I put it onto a women's knife sheath, because this pattern and the patterning on that would have likely been an identifying pattern for a woman's piece. It likely identifies who it came from and the family it came from. So, as exhibited in the first picture, that alone, just those 2 little rows, was over 4 hours of prep and beadwork. I believe by the end, which is not this photo, but the next photo, I believe I figured out it ended up taking 33 hours of time. And I tried to keep it as close to archival as I could, where it's brain tanned, traditional processed leather, glass beads, all of that. And then there's the finished item, technically unfinished because the back isn't done, but we're not going to talk about that. As the person who is closing out the pilot run for community curators, to my knowledge, could be wrong on that. I'm extremely thankful for the opportunity, because I, when I was approached about it, Jennings and Angel, the 2 people that I worked with primarily, told me that out of the group of curators, I was the only real one that had museum background. So they were like, we expect very big things from you. And I'm like, thanks for the pressure. But I'm also extremely grateful for it, because I got to connect with sections of the Twin Cities I hadn't. I've only ever been on the other side, not on the side of the river.
I didn't prepare this question, but now I'm really curious. Did you already know about brain tanning? Like, had you already done some in the past?
I know it in concept. In concept, I know it. That piece specifically came from a friend of mine up in Mille Lacs, who does traditional brain tanning and exhibit stuff for the Indian Museum up there. So I know about it in theory, but also the DNR scares me. So I ain't gonna cross that bridge. So. And then that's all of the people I worked with, as far as I'm aware. I don't believe any of them are here, but thank you.
Rebecca's here.
Hi, Rebecca. You snuck in.
No, thanks for sneaking in. We're glad to have you. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for walking us through that, Mallory. It's really beautiful. And it was ambitious, but you did an amazing job. I think actually I should send some of those pictures to my mom. She sent me some moccasins recently, and I showed them to my grandma, and she's like, she's losing her touch. She needs to wear glasses. This is going to go online, but hopefully my mother won't watch it.
Yeah, Pejuta and Rebecca, when I was working down in the lab, Pejuta would bring something along, and she's like, I'm gonna work on moccasins today, so we're both doing something productive. Okay, whatever you feels best.
Awesome, awesome. So I've got a few questions, and then if there are any questions from the audience, we can take a few of those as well. I'm curious about, so you mentioned you just went in, you typed in Yankton, and sort of went from there. But as you were going through the process, were there other pieces of inspiration that came up for you? Like, why did you choose a knife sheath, for instance?
So specifically the piece that I had thought about doing a knife sheath, and when we were going through items, I specifically told Pejuta and Curation and Archives I wanted to go for women's items. So we looked at turtles, which are women's items for when a girl is born. We looked at knife sheaths, we looked at all covers, we looked at a bunch of different stuff. And initially the idea was to do not a full set of women's items, but do a partial set of items. So do a knife sheath, an all cover, an all, and something else that I'm completely blanking on. Probably like a hanging strap or a holding strap. Initially that was the idea, and then as we kept looking at the pattern and the items, we were like, this might be a little too complex to do all of those items, so let's pick the biggest one. Pick the knife sheath, pick the one that's going to take the most work and the most effort. And then I can do an all and an all cover and such later on down the line when I actually finish the entire piece. So So we looked at those items, and there's a knife sheath that is in collections that's not beaded, but it's quilled, and it's interlocking quill work that's gorgeous. And I just stared at it for close to 10 minutes when I saw it, and I was like, I want to do something like that.
Wonderful. And what was your experience as you were going through the collections, like looking all these things? What was your experience in general of working with like in the collections, both like with the items and exploring those items, and then with the folks as well?
Extremely positive, and also extremely culturally aware and very sensitive. So one of the things that I really liked when I first went down to collections during the initial dinners and initial work in the very beginning of the fellowship was there are stickers on different drawers that say, this drawer contains like items from eagles, it contains hawk feathers, it contains sacred items. So you know that, okay, if it's a specific thing that you're not supposed to interact with those during certain holidays, certain times of the year, certain times of life, it knows, okay, don't open that drawer. But it also says it on the very outside of the case. So you can know, okay, I'm not even gonna open that. But there's also lovely stickers like biohazard and don't open this cabinet if you don't have gloves. Which is another great thing that just makes the museum professional and my soul happy. But overall, it was extremely positive, and it was extremely positive to know that there's Indigenous staff also that are caring for items in a way that traditionally, like museums haven't necessarily cared for items in that way.
Were there any parts of working in the collections that were challenging for you?
Yeah, during one of the initial visits, one of the other curators was working with birds and avian things because of, I believe, like a color spectrum they were working with. So at one point I did have to like step completely back into a row of the collections because they were like, oh, we're going to take out a dead hawk and a part of a dead eagle, I want to say. And I was like, nope, we're going to step back here where I can't see that, because I was like, not mentally prepared.
I have a similar experience, probably not for the same reasons, but the things in jars in there. I can't go in any of the rooms with jars with things floating in them.
Not even the alien?
No. But that's
The
the secret.
alien. Hello, he's so cute.
No, I'm not big on the biology collections, but I love our anthropological collections. I could spend all day down there.
I will say the wet specimen room, while fascinating, terrifying.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
So what are you hoping that people will learn or take with them after seeing your display?
One, I hope they read the whole bio and don't just look at the picture and go, that's a white lady. Because, and that's something that going into this fellowship, I was very kind of hesitant of, was like, what do I do in a way that's not gonna be blatantly in your face about that idea? Or like, what can I do that's not gonna directly be like in your face? So when I chose women's items, I was like, okay, this is a little less known. It's not necessarily hidden, but it's also so specific to so many different communities that it's like, oh yeah, no, let's pick something that's specific to my home.
Absolutely. Anything else you're hoping that people will learn or experience, go through when they're looking at your display?
Know that my fingers hurt beating that.
I bet they do.
I have a permanent callus on one of my fingers from when I did not wear a thimble.
Is there anything you would have liked to include, but you were limited by like time or distance? I know that you had mentioned wanting to do more items, but realizing that you didn't have the capacity for that. Are there any other ways you wanted to make your display this big thing, but you just weren't able to incorporate certain things?
I wanted to put a knife sheath from collections alongside the items to kind of show knife sheath and collections item and then the kind of combination of the two. But also I would have wanted to put the knife sheath that was covered in porcupine quills out, and I don't think that was an option. Maybe, but like also I respect that it's a fragile item and there was no other real like pull to any other knife sheaths in there. They were all from different bands that I was not necessarily associated with. So I was like, I don't know that I want to put that in the case.
Okay. I didn't send you this question ahead of time. I'm just thinking of it now, but we are doing the Community Curators program again. We've seen great success and we are really appreciative of the community relationships that we're forming and the opportunity to get folks doing their own curation. Is there anything you would advise, any advice you would give to future community curators working in the Science Museum of Minnesota? I'm sorry, I shouldn't have given you a surprise question.
No, it's a good question. Don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid. The doors going into archives and the doors going into collections and just being down there in and of itself can feel very heavy at times. But don't be scared of it, because what kind of kept pushing me through is knowing like the item that I picked may not have been handled by a Dakota person or a Dakota woman in Lord knows how many years. There are items in those drawers and in those spaces and in those vaults that want to be found and they want to be heard. And they're not able to if we don't try to.
And I think they feel like further away or like bigger because they're in these big white rooms and the big drawers with the cranking handles, and you have to use your badge to get into this top secret room. But a lot of these things were made by people just like you and me, and giving people an opportunity to get close to them and learn from them and reinterpret them again is what we're all about in the Community Curators program. So we're really grateful to have you contributing.
Just like one of the other, the Hmong curators, where they had the question of like, oh, this is just a pot we used to cook, but what's the context here? I'm like, it's a great question.
It is indeed. So yeah, anyone watching online, if you're interested in being a community curator next year, reach out to us. Jennings Mergenthal is our point person, jmergenthal@smm.org. But I do want to create the opportunity for anyone in the audience who has any questions to go ahead and throw them out there. Any questions from folks in attendance today?
Is this a button? No, it's not.
It's just talk into it.
Oh.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. You can like throw it around at each other.
And not worry.
Questions? I guess I'll start with the first question. So not necessarily knowing the term collections, being a bit outside of the science community in the museum, is the collections a specific term for this type of exhibit, or is this per community collection?
I will say, Rebecca, feel free to correct me if I go away from the course, but our collections is any of the stuff we've collected since our inception, and some of that is anthropological items, things having to do that with people, stuff that people made, but we also have an extensive biology collection of like animals, seeds, things of that nature. Anything I'm missing here, Rebecca?
So when we refer to collections, capital C, it's for the permanent accession collections of the museum. So it's about 2 million items divided between anthropology, biology, and paleontology. And then we also hold education collections, but we don't manage those. We just manage the permanent collections. So yeah, close, very good.
Any other questions from folks? Are there any coming in online? Anybody who's online, you can feel free to type into the chat and
Hello?
That knife shield?
Yes,
When are-
eventually.
When are you gonna finish it?
That's a question for someone else in this audience. That's not me.
Come on, moms always have questions. Anybody else?
When does eventually start?
Yes.
You mentioned that this was the first project of beading on leather
Mhm.
because your other beading projects were string,
Mhm.
and so, do you think you might continue to bead on leather in a smaller scale?
With a thimble.
With a thimble, for sure, yes.
With a thimble, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I want to learn how to make like moccasins and actually do bigger project with that. But yes, with a thimble this time.
In starting to work on leather, have you found like folks in community that you can bead with, like outside of SMM? I know that like my mother and grandmother and aunt, it's basically like competition for them. And so they bead with each other, but they're constantly trying to outdo one another.
Yes and no. So I have people to bead with, but it's through like social media. So beading with like people I knew from high school on like social media or Zoom or whatever. And then I have people and mentors I worked with at a couple other fellowships that, yeah, will bead on like Zoom. And of course, they'll turn around and be like, look, I'm done. And I'm just like, I just stabbed myself 4 times. But
Who are some of the mentors you've learned the most from?
some of the ones I learned most from are, well, Pejuta is one. Like, I'm very grateful I got to work with Pejuta because I saw the announcement about the anthropology intern. Is that her title?
Coda Curatorial Fellow.
Thank you. I saw all of the information about it. I saw like her take the job and everything like that. I was very grateful to work with someone who is raised in a way that also was then able to teach me. But at the same time, I have a mentor. Her name is Larissa from the Navajo Nation, and I get to see her this summer. Finally. Dang it, COVID. I get to see her, but then I also have mentors from up at White Earth in Ojibwe country, Mille Lacs, and friends of mine who, when they go through their own collections at spaces they work or they find old beadwork, I will literally just get pictures being like, can you make this? And I'm like, if you pay me.
You can try.
I can try. No guarantees.
Pajutta actually made me this lanyard. Pajutta's lanyard is sharp, really nice. I was like, what a great lanyard. I need one of those. And then came to work and it was sitting on my desk.
Makes baby moccasins, and I'm just like, they're so tiny and they're so cute.
Well, we're not here to talk about Pajutta. We're here to talk
Dang it.
about you. Are there any other questions from audience members for Mallory?
Hi, yes. It's kind of an odd question, but if there's anything from your experience for somebody like me who's not a part of the culture as much, what's one thing you would want somebody like me to take away from this or like to learn from this specifically?
To learn that beadwork is not just culturally like pretty, but it's significant in different ways. One of the things that I know it's in my bio panel, but it's not on here, is that a knife sheath is a woman's item in the way that a Dakota woman, when she has gone through the process of going from girl to woman and she's learned how to make a knife sheath, everything like that, it's a symbol of she is a complete person. She is complete without anything else. And the knife sheath is one of the examples of that, and proving that she is complete in the way that the culture sees her. So just taking away that it is pretty, it is very pretty, but that it's also culturally, it says a lot.
Looks like we got another question out there.
Hello. Forgive me if you answered this in the presentation. I was late because traffic.
It's fine.
What was the biggest difference from beading things like earrings to beading on leather?
Learning you don't stab all the way through the leather, because that is the way that you give yourself really nice stab wounds. No, learning that beading on leather is more about, it gives it more strength when it goes through the center part of hide versus all the way through, because when you go all the way through, you're gonna pull, and when you pull on like that, the tension can rip straight through. And I learned that, about 2 weeks into beading, and Pejuta corrected me. Pejuta took one look at it and went, let me teach you. I'm like, okay. Okay, Auntie, thank you.
Awesome. Any other questions from folks out there?
Bueller?
Doesn't look like we got anything online. So
I don't think so.
yeah, I just want to one more time thank you so much for being one of our community curators. It has meant a lot, and I think that this program is just the start of some really radical and authentic community inclusion, not just community engagement, but including community in from the start around decision making and representation. And we're so glad to have you be a part of that.
Kidamayaye for having me. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks, everyone.